Hi everybody, welcome to Lesson 8, Quiz 1 Explanation. In this video, we'll be going through the two passages that are part of this quiz. Really important that you look at how to answer the questions. For the next quiz, the passage will be much longer, which is quite similar to the real GED exam. In this quiz, the passage is actually quite short, so you won't have time in the real exam to read the whole passage. So what shortcuts can you learn to try and find the right answer? Let's have a look as we go together. So question number 1, what was the outcome of the famous duel between Hamilton and Burr? A duel can be when two people compete, but often in history, a duel would be competing with swords or with guns. For example, maybe you offend somebody. Maybe you say something about somebody's wife, or you insult them. Well, they might challenge you to a duel to defend their honor. So that's what's happening here. And we're looking at the outcome of the famous duel. We might find the word duel somewhere in the passage. Looking at the outcome, that means the solution. So we could be looking towards the end of the passage. Hamilton wounded the unpopular Burr. Hamilton and Burr were both seriously injured. Burr killed Clinton, or Burr killed Hamilton. So we notice that A, B, and D all talk about Hamilton and Burr, but answer C talks about Clinton. Well, the question says between Hamilton and Burr. And if we look at the beginning, the second paragraph, there is a famous duel between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. So Clinton is not included in the duel. We can remove answer C. I think we should look down at the last paragraph first. If this was a long paragraph, a long passage, we might be thinking, how can we save a bit of time reading? So the outcome would be the solution, the end of the duel. So maybe we should look at the end of the passage. In 1804, Burr was in New York, making a last effort to win control of the state in the gubernatorial election. Gubernatorial is, I think, where you choose the governor. But Burr's longtime nemesis, that is your enemy, George Clinton, routed him again. So Clinton beat Burr. Hamilton contributed significantly to the result. So Hamilton was helping Clinton to defeat Burr. And so this came before vengeful revenge plotting by Burr. So Burr plotted to get his revenge against Hamilton with one bullet. Well, the bullet could be in a duel. With one bullet, Burr sealed his fate, ever to be the pariah, the cast out, the one that people hated. Hamilton, aging so old but game, willing, was denied his last best wish to care for his family. Why was he not able to care for his family? Because he died. So the correct answer would be answer D. Burr killed the aging Hamilton. Number 2, based on this excerpt, which sentence accurately compares Burr and Hamilton? Neither man came close to winning the presidency. So is it that they both wanted to be president, but neither was close? Both men became outcasts. Well, it does say that Burr became a pariah, an outcast. It does not say that Hamilton became an outcast. Burr became the outcast because he killed Hamilton. So possibly B is not going to be correct. C, Burr was more dangerous to the nation. More dangerous, that would be a difference. And the question is asking for a comparison, not a contrast. So C cannot be correct. D, both men sought power. So if they both seek power, the answer is D. If neither is close to winning the presidency, then the answer is A. Let's look at the passage. Fleming uses the occasion of the famous duel between Burr and Hamilton to make a sweeping examination of the nation's affairs from about 1795 until Burr's death in 1836. Both Burr and Hamilton were flawed. They had weaknesses, both of them. That's the similarity. That word both links to the idea of the comparison. Both were excessively ambitious. They wanted to do well. Both posed significant threats to the nation's equilibrium. Both were dangerous to the nation's balance. It is to Fleming's credit that he portrays them for what they were and still manages to make them strangely likable. So the next two paragraphs explain about Hamilton and Burr separately. Hamilton was well past his wartime heroics when Fleming introduces him. He had returned to his private law practice in New York without having achieved either of his two most cherished goals, the formation of a strong central government and a lasting place at its head, the head of the government. So he wanted to be the president of the government. He was debt-ridden and barely clinging to the leadership of the Federalist Party. He was the leader of the Federalists. So this is the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. This is probably after the American War of Independence. This is looking at how federal should the country be, or how much power should the states have. He is the leader of one of the political parties, and he wanted to be the president. Burr, on the other hand, had come close to the presidency in 1800, when he and Thomas Jefferson each received 73 electoral votes. Burr had only to persuade a few people to change their position, and the office would have been his. However, for complex private reasons, he chose not to make the effort. So Burr almost became president. So Burr did come close to being president. But for Hamilton, he did not achieve his goal. He was nowhere near. He was barely clinging to the leadership of the Federalist Party. He was not in a strong position. He was nowhere near becoming the president. So both men wanted power. One came close, one did not. So that's why the correct answer is D. And then question number 3. Which of the following most likely represents Fleming's attitude toward his subjects? He thinks Hamilton was the more likable of the two men. He admires Burr's strong ambition. He is sympathetic toward both men. He believes that Burr deserved to become a pariah. Well, if we look at that third paragraph, it is to Fleming's credit. He portrays them for what they were. He shows what they were really like, and still makes them strangely likable. So if you describe somebody and you describe them in a likable way, that probably means that you like them. Another way of saying that you like them would be that you are sympathetic towards them. If he did not like Burr, then he could have described him in a horrible way for killing somebody else. If he did not like Hamilton, he could have described him in a horrible way because he never succeeded. He was a failure. He was almost broke. He had no money. He failed to become the president. There are many ways that Fleming could have described them so that they were not likable by the reader, but he chose not to. He chose to be sympathetic towards them. He chose to make them likable. So answer C is correct. Now, the first question for this new passage says, what is the tone of this excerpt? And this question is a real pain. If it's the first question for a new passage, you basically have two choices. You can look at the answers, maybe read the first 1 or 2 paragraphs and try to answer, and probably put a red flag there so you can come back later. Or you could just put a red flag, go forward, and come back to it after you've read the rest of the passage. For me, I would probably try to answer it quickly, but flag it so that I would go back at the end. And I say that just because if you don't answer it, you might run out of time. I've known many students taking the GED exam that planned to go back and look at many questions, but actually left 5 or 6 unanswered. Now, if you put any answer there, you have a 1 in 4 chance to get the question correct. So probably guess quickly, flag it, go forward is the best option. But what is the tone of this excerpt? Well, an argumentative tone means that you have an opinion and you are trying to prove it. You give your first reason, second reason, third reason. And argumentative and persuasive are very similar. In an argument, you are giving reasons for what you believe. If you are doing persuasive writing, you are trying to make other people agree with you. So both of them would be giving reasons for an opinion, but the argument is just explaining why you believe something, whereas the persuasive one is trying to make other people agree with you. Honestly, there's not much difference between these two. Descriptive, well, that describes something. It does not give an opinion. It does not try to look for patterns. It just simply describes what the thing is. And then analytical does analysis. And analysis is kind of difficult to explain, but it can be sometimes looking for patterns, looking for similarities, looking for differences. It could be comparing different things and drawing a conclusion. Analysis, you don't just look at what it is, you try to go beyond it. Well, let's have a look at the first paragraph. If photographs were expected to be iodized images, this is still the aim of most amateur photographers, for whom a beautiful photograph is a photograph of something beautiful, like a woman or a sunset. In 1915, Edward Steichen photographed a milk bottle on a tenement fire escape. A tenement means a block of flats. An early example of quite a different idea of the beautiful photograph. And since the 1920s, ambitious professionals, those whose work gets into museums, have steadily drifted away from lyrical subjects, conscientiously exploring plain, tawdry, or even vapid material. So this is looking at what it was like before and what it is like now. It's showing the difference. It's showing a contrast, how things have changed over time. There's no opinion and reasons, so I think we can take away A and B. The question is it just describing what happened over time, or is it analyzing what happened over time? Let's continue. In recent decades, photography has succeeded in somewhat revising for everybody the definitions of what is beautiful and ugly, along the lines that Whitman had proposed. If, in Whitman's words, each object or condition or combination or process exhibits a beauty, it becomes superficial, no meaning really, to single out some things as beautiful and others as not. If all that a person does or thinks is of consequence, it comes arbitrary to treat some moments in life as important and most as trivial. Trivial means not important. So this is talking about what is beautiful, what is not beautiful. Really, we are going into quite a lot of detail, looking at the differences, and along the lines that Whitman had proposed, that phrase is comparing what people think is beautiful today and what somebody said was beautiful in the past. It's kind of drawing links. And so this is beyond description, this is more analytical. Question number 5. According to this excerpt, what is the aim of many recent professional photographers? Recent professional photographers. To make beautiful and lyrical photographs, to photograph precise images of places, to photograph everyday subjects, or to make photographs that will get into museums. Well, in the first paragraph, we had like a tour through history of what people did. So in early decades, photographers wanted idealized images. That was a long time ago, though. Okay, and then as we go through history, since the 1920s, people wanted to get their work into museums, and then they drifted away from lyrical subjects. In the 1920s, they go away from lyrical subjects, but early decades, 1920s, this is 100 years ago. The question asks about recent photographers, and that's a very important word in the question, recent. We can actually see in the passage that it says in recent decades. Photography has succeeded in somewhat revising for everybody the definitions of what is beautiful and ugly, along the lines of what Whitman proposed. So it becomes arbitrary to treat some moments in life as important and most as trivial. Everything becomes important. It becomes superficial to single out some things as beautiful and others as not. So they're not trying to get precise images. They're not trying to take beautiful things. Beautiful pictures, by the way, was up here in the very beginning, beautiful women, sunset, etc. They're not looking for special women or special places. They're looking for everyday objects. And they're looking at, they're looking at everyday objects. So the best answer would be C. So we find the word recent in the passage, recent decades, and then we read through this, and this is saying that there shouldn't be a difference between some things to photograph and some things not to photograph. Everything deserves to be photographed. And if everything deserves to be photographed, then everything means everyday things. Whatever you see around you each day could be the subject of a photograph. Next question. Based on the information in the final paragraph about Whitman and Warhol, which of the following comparisons is most accurate? Comparison, so things that are similar. Whitman is to Warhol as a photograph is to a subject, a celebrity is to a non-celebrity, beauty is to ugliness, or feeling is to indifference. So we need to look, what does Whitman believe and what does Warhol believe? And we should read the whole of this second paragraph. To photograph is to confer importance. There is probably no subject that cannot be beautified. Moreover, there is no way to suppress the tendency inherent in all photographs to accord value to their subject. So if you take a photograph, then what you are taking a photograph of is important. If it was not important, you would not waste your time. Okay, today is a little bit different. We have smartphones, we can take thousands of pictures every month. But before, if you wanted to take a picture, you would need a film, you would need to develop it, you would have to spend money, it would go to a special shop. It was quite a long process to get the photograph out of the camera. So you would only take photographs of things that you liked or that you thought were important, not like today. But the meaning of value itself can be altered, as it has been in contemporary culture of the photographic image, which is a parody of Whitman's Evangel. In the mansions of pre-democratic culture, someone who gets photographed is a celebrity. In the open fields of American experience, as catalogued with passion by Whitman and as seized upon with a shrug by Warhol, everybody is a celebrity. So, passion, that means excitement. A shrug is where you move your shoulders up and down, like saying, I don't know, I don't care. So, Someone who gets photographed is a celebrity. This is passionate by Whitman. He's excited by this. And Warhol gives a shrug. He doesn't care. So passion has a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling. A shrug is indifference. So the best answer would be D. Whitman has passion and excitement. Warhol does not care. And then the last question for this passage. Based on the information in the excerpt, with which of the following statements would Whitman most likely agree? Every being has dignity and worth. The best photographs are not in museums. The ugliest subjects are frequently the most beautiful, or many people are superficial. Well, in Whitman's words were in paragraph 1. Each object or condition or combination exhibits a beauty. Every object has beauty. And then, all that a person does or thinks is of consequence. Everything that a person does, everything that a person thinks is important, is consequential. So every object has beauty, every person is important. So it's not talking about ugly becoming beautiful. He doesn't say anything is ugly. He says everything has a beauty of its own. So he would not agree with any opinion of something being ugly. And he says everybody, whatever somebody does or thinks is consequential, is important. So superficial means you don't really care, you don't go deep, you only look at the outside. Well, that's the opposite of important. So D is wrong. So we're looking at A or B. He doesn't really talk about museums, but he does talk about every object being beautiful and every person being important. So every being has dignity, has honor, has importance, has worth. Another word for worth would be value. Everything has importance and beauty. Everything and everyone is valuable. Answer A would be the best. Well, I know that's been quite a difficult lesson, especially this passage. It's quite confusing and it's definitely on a topic that you've never seen before. But the more that you practice on passages like this, the better you will get at looking at the question and trying to find things in the passage. For example, in this one, we see about Whitman, and so we go and match Whitman to Whitman's words, and then we find the answer from this section. You will have long passages, they will be difficult in your exam, so you need to practice that skill of finding the right section and then looking carefully for the answer. O să las ai, Coda.